Hello, everyone. Welcome back to OpenTableAdventures. As always, I'm Dan the Baker, and we are back today with Table Talks, our little interview series where we talk to some of our and hopefully your favorite TTRPG content creators. Today I have with me Luke. How are you doing, Luke?
Hey, how's it going? I am super excited to be here. I've watched a bunch of your episodes already, and I'm really excited to be on your show. So thank you for having me.
I'm so happy for you to be here. Why don't we start off? You just tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do.
Yeah, so I am Luke Miller. I am a tabletop role-playing game slash creative tool designer out of California. I run Graycastle Press, where I create kind of creative tools, games as tools for writers and game masters. So I try to build creative things that kind of help people get over writer's block, tell really amazing stories, and just find new inspiration and creativity in the stuff we create, whether that's writers, game masters, players of tabletop role-playing games, all of the above. So I really love being able to take this medium that we all get to play in and use it to help also jumpstart other creative processes. So that's kind of what I'm all about, other than living here in California with my husband and my two corgis who are snoring in the background. Hopefully you don't have to hear them snoring too bad, but yeah, that's me
If
in a
we hear
nutshell.
him, yeah, if we hear him snoring, we'll put a picture up somewhere around here. Um,
They're very cute. They're very loud.
as corgis tend to be. Cool. I would love to start off talking about. I'd love to talk about Journey. Because
Oh yeah.
what was your, I guess, journey in creating and developing that? And I guess tell
Yeah,
the
so
audience
Journey
what that
is
is. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Journey is my solo world building game. That is my very first thing I ever created and published, kind of in the realm of tabletop role playing games. And it is a world building game that allows you to step into a fictional world that you've created. Whether you're a writer working on a novel or a game master working on a tabletop role playing game campaign, it allows you to kind of visualize that a little bit more, step in and kind of zoom in on some new details in that world to be able to take back to your creative work. And so I created Journey after, in the early pandemic, I had already been kind of wanting to get into tabletop role-playing games for a few years. And I think, as a tale as old as time for a lot of folks, it can be really hard to find a group, and especially when you're just trying to play online. And I've heard a lot of horror stories about it. But I managed to find an amazing group. We've been playing together for years. It was kind of just this light bulb moment where we all came together super randomly and forged like a really cool, tight-knit online group out of that, which was pretty amazing. But being able to like play these stories and see how you take these, and I know there's some divisiveness on referring to things like D&D as a storytelling game, as a storytelling experience. Some people are very staunchly that it's a strategy game. It's not a storytelling game, and if you're doing storytelling, you're doing it wrong. I feel like being able to see these storytelling aspects of these games really made it click for me, where I had this world building process I've always had in my head, I've always used for my projects, and I've never been able to like explain it. And suddenly, when playing these tabletop role playing games with my new friends, I started to see how you could kind of mechanize some of these processes and make them more repeatable and explainable. And so I started tinkering with it. How do I take the way I do world building, and or at least one aspect of world building, and codify that into a game? And then over the next like 6 months, Journey took shape and did play testing, and people responded really well. And since I released it in, I think it was 2021 in March that I released it, I sold a few thousand copies, which feels kind of amazing. But
Mhm.
I think even more than that is getting to see and hear from people that reach out to me and they're like, I built this amazing thing with Journey and it totally worked. So it definitely came out of like my newfound love of tabletop games, but being able to like translate these weird ways my head works into something I could share with people was a big motivator.
Cool. And have you always been like a creative writer? Like, have you always been kind of like that world building, like fantasy world kind of writer?
Yeah, I learned to read before kindergarten, and I
Oh,
feel
wow.
like ever since then I always have like a book in my hand, and it's always fantasy. It's usually pretty pulpy. I would like to be like, oh, I'm a reader and I read history and nonfiction. I don't. I read Dragonlance. I read lots of good fantasy, sci-fi. And so being able to have those stories bouncing around in my head, especially as I started reading Dragonlance when I was younger, and really finding like this thing I could grab onto, it definitely made me more of like a creative writer. And I've had a lot of little projects throughout my life. I've still yet to publish a novel, which is on my bucket list, but I still have a scan of a map I made when I was like 10 years old of this like world that I then was like populating with races and magic and gods and goddesses and just kind of going nuts with it. And so every so often I pull that map up and be like, oh, that's really cool. And I've come from there to where I am now. Still not having written a book in that world that I had created so many years ago, but being able to do so many other creative things with that energy that I kind of picked up as a kid.
Listen, writing novels are hard. Like, I don't know. I don't think anyone thinks that they're easy, but like if you think you can just whip out a novel, like it's, hard work. I mean, there are some people who can whip out novels, but they usually have they have a formula.
Absolutely.
Like Jodi Picoult, she's a cookie cutter, she knows.
Yeah.
Or just use ghostwriters like James Patterson.
Yeah, it's hard, man. Like I sit down and I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna write something, and I've got this. My mind is just buzzing with like this idea, and I need to get this idea out. And so I start writing, and then you realize like writing is really hard sometimes, and it's not. It's staying consistent and doing it to the point where you've started with 0 words and ended with a book. And it's hard. That's a lot of time and a lot of dedication, which I am an impatient Mayfly project kind of person. I feel like it's a miracle that I've released the books that I have so far.
Yeah. It's so hard to be like, okay, how do I have all these images and all these like impulses in here. I have all these electrical impulses. How do I get those into other people's brains? How do I transfer that onto a page into other people's brains? And it's hard.
It's rough.
Yeah, I've always found when it comes to writing fiction, I've been good at world building. I've been good at creating a world that I want to write in, but I'm terrible at writing dialogue and interesting dialogue, which is so funny because now playing TTRPGs, I don't have to worry about the dialogue for the most part, Like, I'm mostly bouncing off other people, so it's like, oh, I don't have to worry about that at all. Great, I'm just gonna do this. I don't need to write a novel.
I feel like that's the magic of game mastery. Whatever game you're playing, it's the idea that you get to, whether you're playing in like an established world like the Forgotten Realms or you've created something new, you get to add to it. You get to bring that world to life, which I feel like for the type of creative person that you and I are, that is like the magic right there. And it's especially when you bring other people into it and you get their energy that you get to feed off of, and it's this whole collaborative thing. It's just the best. I feel like game mastery is where it's at.
Yeah, and it's great because like when you do write stories, when you write fiction, you don't always get to see people's reactions, to like what you're writing. Like you'll every now and then people can comment and like send you messages, be like, oh my god, I love this. But like when you're running a game, you get a real life live reaction of people, like how they feel about what you've created. Like you get those gasps, you get those you get the laughs. Like it's it's right there in front of you, and I think that's really motivating for me, at least.
Oh, absolutely. I feel like that is, anytime I get to run a session, because I am the game mat. Well, we haven't been playing a lot lately because I've been so busy, but normally I've been running a game with this group for the last couple of years, and to be able to have these stories that we've established and get to surprise them still, and have the inside jokes that we've come up with, and be able to, like, as you said, put things in front of them, have them really engage with it. I think as a creative person, having something that I've made that somebody has engaged with in in a meaningful way, that they got something out of, that they resonated with, I love that. I feel like my favorite thing in the world is when one of my players messages me during or after a game and it was just like, you scared the hell out of me here. Oh my god, that was amazing. And that, you're right, that real time connection with the person consuming the thing and engaging with the thing you're making is amazing. I love it.
Inject it right into my bloodstream. It's so good.
Every day if I could.
You mentioned a little bit about how you had that online group that you started off playing TTRPGs with, but you might have said this and I just missed it. But what was what inspired you to be like, oh, I want to play TTRPGs? Like, what was that first thought?
That's a really good. it's a good question, because I always feel a little bit of like, not shame, but like a little bit of like, oh God, like roll your eyes at young Luke Miller, where I feel like when I was a teen, I've always been a big nerd, and I feel like I was always had that little thing in my head of, well, at least I don't play Dungeons and Dragons. I'm not that much of a nerd. And I look back and I'm like, how silly like that was, because it is so cool. I wish I had come to this hobby when I was younger. I think I had been aware of D&D and tabletop role-playing games for a long time, and they were always kind of there like, well, that sounds interesting, but I don't know anybody who plays it, and so there was never really like an opportunity to like attach myself to it. And then at one point, I remember watching a video. It was around the time I started watching Critical Role and realizing that like actual plays were a thing, and I could see what this process and experience, at least one version of this experience, is like playing these games. And then also watching Matt Colville's Running the Game series and finding out like, oh, this is what a dungeon master does. And all of these, like, I feel like the neurons, it's like that lady doing the math in the meme. Like, all of a sudden things were connecting in my brain. And I'm like, oh, that's it. Like, that's my new personality. Like, that's what I need to do. And it was like a year before I managed to find my group. I would try to find people locally, and it would kind of fizzle. Or I went and played one Adventures League game at a local game shop, which was cool, but it wasn't the experience I was looking for.
A whole different ball game than like the Critical Role and stuff like that. Yeah.
A nice opportunity for me to like feel kind of what it's like, but to have a game that's running multiple times where you're building these relationships with people and telling deeper stories with people, that's like the meat and potatoes I was really wanting to get to. And so it built and built and built, and finally I found this group, and I was like, oh, you're my new friends, and you're gonna get like all of it.
Yeah, for sure. No, I totally get that. It is funny you talk about that, like, oh, D&D is kind of this last bastion of nerddom, because it was in like, 2014 with the Adventure Zone. The McElroys, I'm pretty sure, said that exact same thing of like, oh, D&D's always been that, like, at least I'm not a D&D player. Like, I might be a nerd, but like, oh, I'm not like a guy sitting in the basement playing D&D, like that kind of thing. Like, that's kind of always how it's been. But, like that, and that was, 2014, that was almost 10 years ago. This is coming out in like February, so it is currently 2023. But, so it will be 10 years. Wild. But yeah, like I feel like it has been that it always has been that kind of like, up until the last 10 years or so, has been like, oh, at least I don't play D&D, at least I'm not that much of a nerd. And it's definitely,
which I'm so glad that's changing.
Yeah,
because there's like something in tabletop role-playing games for everyone. If you like doing acting, you can really lean into the role-playing of your character. If you like doing art and design, like draw character portraits and get into it that way. If you like writing, world building, there's just something for anybody. One of our players in our group is a musician, and he wrote the theme song to 2 of our campaigns, and that we just, we're not doing podcasts of it, at least not yet. Or any actual plays, but we get to play this like thematic and evocative theme song that our friend wrote, and that's just so cool. Like bringing these different avenues of creativity to TTRPGs, where there's just so much room for everyone.
Yeah, it's like it's the stem of gaming, like it's just there's all the different parts of it all coming together.
That's a really good way to put it.
Or the steam, I guess they call it now. I say this as if I wasn't I was a music major in college for a little bit, so like I was the A in STEAM. I also love, whenever I have other queer people on, I love to ask them about how does your, like your queerness and your queer identity, how does that affect your TTRPG experience?
I realized I got my rainbow flag is behind me, so it's right there. Oh, yeah. My rainbow flag and my Liza Minnelli and my Hello Dolly. I always have all my little gay things scattered behind me on my
your
work
2 corgis.
I'm on camera. I'm like, you're gonna know. Yeah, I think that something about tabletop role-playing games and being able to step into these roles of different characters, especially as a DM where you're inhabiting like a whole world, like you are the world around the players. I think that you bring a lot of yourself to those experiences, no matter your identity. And I think as a queer person who's been out for, oh my God, like 20 years now. I came out when I was 13, so a little more than 20 years. That's wild to me. It feels like yesterday. That's wild. Anyway, moving on. I'm old. You really do bring a lot of yourself and your experiences to these characters and these stories we get to tell, and I think it gives us a certain amount of empathy and understanding of different kinds of conflict, I would say, that do really well for bringing that kind of using that understanding to tell compelling stories of all kinds. And I think that it gives us a certain openness to explore different kinds of stories. I think that that's one thing I've always been very grateful about being a gay man, is that I don't necessarily have the same feelings of restriction around, like, oh, this is what this thing is, regardless of what that might be. Like, this is the way it is because that's the way it is and that's the way we do it. By being comfortable of like moving off of that path, you get to tell some cool stories, and you're not just telling tropes and the old standard storytelling models. You get to go off and try different things and bring in different perspectives and viewpoints. I feel like the more I'm kind of diving into it, though, it really does dovetail in with any kind of identity. Really, you're bringing yourself into that creative process, no matter what kind of creative process you're engaging with. And in tabletop games, I think it really allows you to bring different elements of conflict and story to life, and to inject meaning and empathy into those in some really, really cool ways. I think that I don't know that it makes me a better storyteller, but it gives me an opportunity and a comfortability with exploring different things that, I might not otherwise be. I can't speak for everybody, obviously, but in my own experience, I think it makes me more open to exploring other parts of myself and other parts of the world through our stories. I think that I've always said we kind of align a lot with the Dimension 20 vibe, where it's, capitalism's always the enemy and it's always capitalism. And I think there's a lot to that that's so much fun to explore, because
that's just real life.
It's
so
yeah, it's like a fantasy world. It's, you're in the Forgotten Realms, but you're tackling real stuff. And I think that it's a way for us all living in this, crazy, I hesitate to use the word hellscape, but this chaotic, tumultuous world that we're in. It gives us the opportunity to like explore those and explore resolving those. Like, what does resolving these issues look like? We can't always take down the system like we might want to do in D&D, but we may be able to find some at least relief by engaging with these, and a little bit of maybe a semblance of a feeling of control when we don't have a lot against the systems that are in place. So I think it's a little bit of that, I guess. In 2023, it's weird to say, like, my queerness allows me to explore more of a countercultural point of view in our stories, but a little bit of that.
Yeah, I think
Sorry,
there's always
all over the place.
Oh no, it's totally fine. That's I always say I love when my guests ramble because it's less work for me to do.
That's a good point.
But it's there's always this conversation of like diversity at the table, especially when it comes to like actual plays and stuff like that. But also I feel like at a home table, it's important just to have, a diverse set of backgrounds and perspectives, because that just makes a more interesting story. And I think I said it, this is a couple weeks ago now, is like the same way you wouldn't want to have a D&D party that's all the same class, all the same subclass, all the same. Like, you want everyone to be different and everyone to bring something new and different. I think that should be reflected in the players as well. Yeah.
That's a really good way to put it. Like, you bring different aspects of yourself and aspects of your background to this really cool experience, and it makes the group stronger and gets to tell better stories as a result. I think that's a really good way to put it.
Yeah. So outside of like TTRPGs, and I guess outside of creative writing as well, are there other creative outlets that you have?
Yeah, I feel like it's outside of TTRPGs is a hard sell for me these days, because I feel like it's become because like you say, it's the steam of gaming where so many things connect and interact with it. I feel like a lot of the things I do are either like an offshoot of that or, another kind of related to it. But I think that my biggest one outside of singing. I don't do it in an organized way anymore, like when I was with the chorus here in Sacramento. But I enjoy singing and music a lot. Like it's always been a huge core of, I think, my creative expression. And on the other side of that, in a role that I don't know that would often be regarded as like a creative role, it's more of a technical thing. Computer programming. I love building apps and websites, and that being able to take an idea for, I wish I could use the computer to do this thing, and then be able to like build it is a really cool experience, and it's, I feel like, very creatively fulfilling in a role that might otherwise be very like technically minded.
No, there's definitely a creative element to that for sure. Yeah, there's a video that's going around TikTok a little bit ago of like this girl who was flabbergasted at the term STEAM, of like, why is art included with science, technology, engineering, mathematics, and like everyone's like, because it should be, because all of that kind of interweaves with each other. So yeah, with that like app building, with that programming, like there is art, like you need to have that creative mindset to be able to do that kind of stuff.
And it's just fun. Like I built, we were playing. My group plays with the Tiny D6 system, and we were using D&D Beyond before. After the big OGL explosion earlier this year, which I can't believe that was only a year ago. Like we moved off of D&D into Tiny D6. We collaboratively built a new world for us to play in, and then essentially rebooted our campaign in this new world, and it's been super, super cool. And so I was able to build us a D&D, a digital tool set for our Tiny D6 game, where we get to have our inventory, and you get all of your character sheet that's live. And so being able to like, even in the TTRPG realm or anywhere else, I kind of have that like, I would love to be able to do this thing, even if it's not necessarily useful. It'll be fun to build, and it's just, I love it. I think it's just so cool. Yeah,
I think the virtual tabletop and like kind of online resource of like TTRPGs is such a, I don't want to say like an untapped market, because there are things out there, but I feel like there is still it's still so limited. I think we're on the verge of it kind of exploding into something huge and being so much more, because there's so much more need for it.
I think because of the amount of growth, I think the TTRPG, I feel like calling it a hobby is weird, because in my brain it's not just a hobby. It's so funny, but like the hobby has grown and exploded so much over like the last 5 years even, that I started building a 3D virtual tabletop at one point, which was super fun. I didn't end up releasing it because it was right in the beginning of lockdown during the pandemic, when suddenly everybody was releasing free virtual tabletops, and so I ended up shuttering it. But what a cool learning experience, and a way to take one creative field and like merge it with something else that I'm really passionate about. So I think being able to, whatever the creative realm you're in, being able to find the connections and the kind of the binding agents between the things you love to do, I think there's really cool ways to see how those things overlap.
Yeah, totally. I have one last question for you, and that is just, are there other solo RPGs that you have gotten into over the years? Like I just got 1,000-Year-Old Vampire, and I'm so excited to crack into it.
So good. I think solo RPGs were kind of a revelation for me after getting into like D&D. Realize, first having that realization when you dip your toe into the water, you're like, D&D is not nearly it. Like there's so many other games out there. And then finding the idea of like a solo game and solo journaling games, where it's like, I don't have to wait for my group to get together. I can try new things throughout these solo games and get to play these different experiences and tell different stories. And 1,000-Year-Old Vampire is such a good example of telling these really engaging and exploring these engaging stories that you're making up, but can still make you like feel like you're the one telling the story, guided by this game, and this game will make you cry. Like somehow you're telling the story as of your vampire, and you'll get twists and turns even though it's just you. Like it's just wild. I think the idea of a solo game, and in the way that people explore it and engage with it in new ways and get to try new things and mechanics, it's like a limitless well. It feels like there's always more cool games out there. 1,000-Year-Old Vampire is great. I really like Artifact, where you you create a magical item. This is one of the games that inspired Journey, where you create a magical item, and then the whole game is you exploring the people that come and discover that item, what they use it for, how they affect history with it, and then how they lose it, and then what happens in the intervening time until the next person comes and takes you up. Magical sword gets passed down through the generations, and you get to explore the world around that sword based on the things that are happening. There's just so many cool opportunities like that for some really amazing creativity and imagination through these kind of guided experiences that solo tabletop games offer. I just think they're one of the coolest things that people can use for their creativity that's out there right now.
For sure. It's also, I think it's a good way to get through writer's block as well, because it is that good, like, almost writing warm-up. Like, that's kind of what I plan on using, Thousand Year Old Vampire for, is I kind of like, let me do a little bit of this before I go into my other, like, creative things, just to get those creative ideas flowing. Yeah, I just played, this isn't a solo, but it's kind of like in that wheel place, but I just played for the first time The Quiet Year with my roommates.
So good.
So good, so fun, so unique and creative. And it's just like every time is something different, even though the cards stay the same, which is so cool.
Yeah. It's all context. All the context changes game to game. Completely different experience.
Yeah. Me and my roommates accidentally recreated the crucifixion. It was great. It was a great time all around. But
yeah, The Quiet Year is so good. Microscope is amazing. We used a combination of Microscope and A Quiet Year to build our new, like, collaborative world that we're playing Tiny D6 in, and it was the coolest experience, because we started with, like, a blank map. We decided that it was going to be like, we have the world before, then there's a big cataclysm, and then there's the world after, and we're somehow over here on the timeline. And it was a matter of going back and forth from the world before and the world after, playing The Quiet Year up to the disaster, and then Microscope for after all that happened. And we came up with, like, the coolest things, the coolest world. Like, we have years worth of exploring different parts of this world, I think, which is very exciting.
So exciting. Great. So I think that brings us to the game portion of our interview.
I will say this. I watched Erica's episode, and I don't think I would have gotten any of those monsters, so we'll see how I do.
Okay. Well, this is a repeat game of, it is called, it's not that one, but it is called By Any Other Name. I have here a list of, I have 5 names of, character names, and I want you to just give me a quick, description off the top of your head of who you think this character is.
Okay, we'll see. We'll see how I do. I'm going to do my best here.
Okay. Scale of, like, 1 to 10, how confident would you say you are?
Solid 3 or 4, but...
Okay. Hey, well, that number will go up. I think that number will go up. It always goes up.
Perfect.
Okay, first name is Zementa Clang.
Zementa Clang?
Yeah, Clang, like clang, clang, clang goes the trolley. Yeah.
Zementa Clang. I feel like there's a trick or a pun or a word play in here somewhere. I'm not finding it. Zementa Clang. Do you have any hints for me?
I don't have any. This is just whatever you come up with.
Oh, I am so... This is why we ask questions about the rules. I was thinking this was like a play on words here that I was going to... Okay, got it. Now I'm placing it in the episode that I watched. Perfect. Zementa Clang. I think that Zementa Clang is a modern... She is in kind of a modern world that's got magic. She is a paladin of the city, and she is in charge of public works in the city. And so it's kind of like she goes and makes sure that the roads are repaired and that the light rail lines are running on time. And so that's her whole dedication, is kind of like a modern cleric or paladin of the city. Zementa Clang is responsible for keeping the trains running on time.
I love that. She needs to do a better job here in New York City.
least you got trains out there. We have barely any public transit, so
That's so valid. Don't look a gift horse and all that. Name number 2 is Genghis Lovejoy.
Genghis Lovejoy. Genghis Lovejoy is a Lothario. Genghis Lovejoy is well known in his city for being a master entertainer. Knows how to come to a party and sweep everyone off their feet. Ladies, gentlemen, and everything in between. Genghis Lovejoy can really play the crowd. Genghis Lovejoy is secretly a spy and collects information from the people that he seduces, and never actually seduces people. Genghis Lovejoy has this really big reputation for being this Lothario, but as far as anybody who knows him can tell, he's asexual. He doesn't actually seduce anybody. He gets the secrets and leaves people feeling happy. So,
hey, that's all we need in life, really. I'd be seduced by Genghis Lovejoy for sure.
I think I already am.
Yeah.
Give away all my secrets.
Number 3 is Clark Ray Lee Montague Yorona III.
Clark Ray Lee. Sorry, give me that one more time.
Yeah, Clark Ray Lee Montague Yorona III.
Also goes by 3 to his friends as his nickname. 3 is I think he's a troublemaker. 3 is actually a dog. He is a prize show dog and secretly has this life in the animal underground of being a masked crime fighter. But by day, he's a Pomeranian and has this really ostentatious name, but is kind of like looked down on by human society as he's this little Pomeranian with this crazy name. But by night is a courageous crime fighter and really keeps things under control. You know, that's 3 for you. Good old Clark.
Yeah. Hey, I would let Clark save me for sure. I would let 3 save me. I'd put myself in danger just so 3 would save me.
I mean, that would just be... how cute would that be?
Yeah, it'd be great. A tiny masked Pomeranian. Wow.
That's great. Yeah, but it sucks for those masked lions in the fur, though, in the morning. Clark, 3's owners sometimes see that, and they're like, I don't know how that happens, and it's always trouble on show day, but, you know.
Yeah, well, he wears a sleep mask, so it makes sense. Yeah.
That's a good point.
Number 4 is just the Vlad.
I think the Vlad is a mythological creature that's known in the countryside of this one region. The Vlad is known for really, scary frights in the night. Oh, don't go outside at night, or the Vlad will get you. It's kind of the Vlad is kind of the boogeyman of the area. But that comes from a handed down legend about a very real mythological creature that lived in the area that really just surprised the town mayor on accident one time and gave him a fright, and really just turned into, how those things snowball. People tell stories over time, and it just, the Vlad was actually a pretty cool mythological creature, was a protector of the area, but, it's just stories change over time, and so now a bit of a boogeyman in the area.
It's one of those telephones.
We'll never know if the Vlad is still around to know what they think about their status and their reputation, but maybe one day.
Tragic figure, the Vlad, truly.
Yeah. Very misunderstood.
Totally. Our 5th last one is Tony Hawk.
Tony Hawk. Tony Hawk is a Olympic level power walker. Tony Hawk got his name. He's a standard human male. In our modern world, no magic, no nothing. Tony Hawk is an Olympic power walker who has struggled for his entire life to get out of underneath the crushing burden of his famous name. And it's, one of the first things people ever say is, oh, Tony Hawk, like, do you skateboard? And every time that happens, a single tear runs down his face, and he says, no, He's actually wishes people would just acknowledge him for his great skill at walking very quickly, just under the level of a jog by competition standards. So he's amazing at what he does, but he just never gets the recognition.
Damn.
I'm sure there's something Freudian in what Tony Hawk means to me, says about me as a person. But
yeah, it's funny because Tony Hawk, the real person, is notorious for people will always go up to him and say, "Hey, do you know you look like Tony Hawk?" Like that's like a thing. That's like in his lore that happens often. Hey, I hope Tony Hawk gets the gold next summer for sure.
Oh, he's gotten a few though. That's the thing. It's really rough. He's won the Olympic gold like 3 years in a row. Power walking, I feel like you don't really maybe age out of it the way you might some other sports. And so he's got a long career ahead of him, just scooping up those golds, but just nobody ever knows about it.
Damn, so sad. Again, a tragic figure. Hey, you did 10 out of 10 on all of those.
Perfect. Oh, I'll take it.
Great.
Gold for me.
Thank you so much for playing.
Yeah.
At this point of our interview, we always love to give our guests a chance to shine a spotlight on something happening in the TTRPG world they want other people to be as excited about as they are. What would you like to shine a spotlight on us for today?
Yeah, I've got two things. I think the first one, I know that Fari RPGs just released his game Stoneburner. It is so cool. It is beautiful. I've been kind of seeing him post on threads recently about coming up to that release, and it seems like it's doing really well. It is a very cool solo-friendly game about dwarves in space, and you've inherited the claim to a space mine and the settlement that's there, and so it's exploring the story of you claiming that and dealing with the fire-breathing demons that live inside the mine, while also fending off other claimants for the settlement too. It's a very cool story, very cool artwork. It's a game I've been looking forward to, and I finally got the PDF yesterday, so I'm excited to sit down and maybe do some playing of Stoneburner solo style during my break. The other one I think is more of a community focused thing. I think a lot of people have been hearing about the layoffs happening at Hasbro and how it's really impacting some pretty critical members of the D&D team. I had already kind of moved away from D&D as kind of my game of choice earlier this year during the OGL debacle, as I always refer to it. But I think it's important to remember that it doesn't mean you can't play D&D. I feel like that's one thing I always run into when we're having these moments where there's a lot of turmoil, especially when it's a big corporation at the heart of it. There's lots of ways to play D&D that are free. You have the SRD. There's lots of ways to play D&D supporting third-party creators by buying their modules and playing their content. And so it's just important, I feel like, to remember as a community, like, how can we keep engaging with the community in really, I think, helpful ways to each other versus just being like, D&D is over, I hate it, I'm never playing D&D again. I think D&D is a great game. There's a reason that it's kind of lasted. It's not the best game for everything you're trying to do, but I think it's important to remember that those 1,100 people, the corporation of Hasbro doesn't really care about us as players and us as the community. It's a corporation, right? It's bottom dollar. And so I think it's important to support the folks that are involved in the things that we like. I think it's really important to support the indie community because it gives a lot of other options than necessarily working and buying from large corporations that don't always have the community's best interests at heart. And so, yeah, I think it's, just spreading awareness about what's going on, which I think everybody's pretty aware of, but just kind of a reminder that you don't have to fully disengage from a game you love. I think it's a great time to go try other stuff. There's so many other games out there that will give an amazing experience for you and your players, or you as a solo player. But I think it doesn't mean you have to let go of this thing you love if D&D is what you want to play. I recommend engaging with third-party content and creators. So I think those would be my two.
For sure. Thank you so much for shining a spotlight. We'd also love to give you a chance, if you have any projects coming up that you would like to talk about. This should be coming out in like February, so if that affects Perfect. What you're talking about.
Gotcha. So I just recently, as of recording, I just released my 4 new copies of Tome for players and game masters. Tome is a set of creative campaign journals that give you kind of prompts every week. I'm kind of trying to show this on my screen, but we'll see if it looks great.
It's showing
And
up.
it
It's
gives
showing
you
up.
an opportunity as part of your session prep to answer some cool questions and think about, either as a game master or a player, how you're engaging with the game, how you're engaging with the story, your characters, your party, the world around you. And so you can kind of, as a player, be understand your character more and understand your connections with the party more. As a game master, it gives you new ideas for world building and things to put in front of your players. And as kind of an addition to your session prep, it just kind of helps, like you were talking about using 1,000-Year-Old Vampire as kind of a creative warm up. It's a way to do a creative warm up for your sessions that really is kind of directed towards making your connection to the game, to your character, to the world stronger and more fleshed out. I like the design of it; is pretty cool. I did a lot of work with antique etchings and engravings and vectorizing them and blowing them up real big, so they're big and bold. So yeah, that's Tome. There's volumes 1 and volume 2 that are released. On graycastlepress.com you can find info about anything I talk about. The other thing that I released this year that I'm still I'm sharing with folks is my website, dealsofopportunity.com. The wish lists on TTRPG and DM's Guild kind of suck because they're kind of just like, well, I'm going to save it to my wish list, and it's just kind of a list of games maybe I'll buy one day. It never lets you know when those things are on sale. Deals of Opportunity, you sign up for free, you add your wish list, kind of set it and forget it. You can add as many wish lists as you want, and it'll let you know to your email anytime any of those titles are on sale. It's been relaunched recently to make it a little bit more user-friendly and a little bit simpler to use. And we've been seeing a lot of people saving money on tabletop role-playing games, which is really cool. It's a fun little project to help folks make sure that they can get the best deal possible on the games they want. So, other than Journey, my solo game, you can also find on my website. I think those are kind of it.
Cool. All those links, where to find all that, will be down below. Thank you so much for joining us here, Luca. It's so much fun getting a chance to talk to you.
Same. I feel like I've been seeing you so much on social media over the last few years that I'm like, it's really cool to sit down and get to talk.
Yeah, no, it's great. I love picking people's brains. This is the whole reason that we started doing this. I hope all of you had a good time hanging out with us as well. Make sure you stick around here at Open Table Adventures. Check out all the things we have for you. We have all of our other interviews at TableTalks. We have our actual plays, like our Monster of the Week game, Park Strangers, our Call of Cthulhu game, Neptune's Revenge. You can see all of our holiday specials we've had over the last couple months. So we have our recipe videos, all of that. So make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out. As always, I have been Dan the Baker, and you are always welcome to pull up a seat. Bye-bye.